excited. Thank you all for coming. Some of you, I think, have been to all of our Midway Living History programs. I think this is our 5th one now. So they're going strong. And for those of you who haven't been here before, this is just meant to be a community conversation. We've invited some special guests to kind of add more to the conversation, because if we don't have anyone here that knows about what we're talking about, then it's not going to be a very good conversation. So I hope that everyone will contribute their knowledge, and we can talk a little bit about the history of agriculture in Midway, what's going on now, how it's changed. Mr. Knuckles is kind enough to have come and brought a lot of stuff from his farm. And he's going to start us out. I'm going to invite him up here just to talk a little bit. And you all can ask questions, and then please just feel free to join in.
All right. Let's see. I brought a little crib sheet in case anybody has some stuff with some facts. All right. Well, my name is Alfred Knuckles. I grew up in Midway. Our family's been here for generations, about as long as the Hicks and everybody in. Of course, yeah, both sides of the Hicks. That's a split division in their family right there. But we've had a general farming and horse farm out west Stevens Street, which is Spring Station, right across from the cemetery is where our part of the farm is located. And I've been doing this my whole life. I didn't like practicing law, so I came back to do this. And law would have probably been a better, I guess, better living, not a better life, just a better living. But anyway, I'm here to talk about horses tonight. We've grown those for quite a while. I've been doing it for, well, all but a few years. I guess since the mid to late 70s on full time. I started working on the farm when I was 11 for summers. That's when my father took away my allowance and made me work, so I was getting paid a whopping sum. I was getting paid half sums. I was getting paid half wages at that time. I was 11 with a weed hook, and I'd drive tractors in the hayfield and stuff like that. And I was working for $3 a day. My first paycheck was $15. I've never forgotten that. Well, by the time he took out Social Security, it was like $14.87. So anyway, it's changed a lot since then. But all right, I guess, what else? Am I the only one that's going to speak right now?
Just right now, I think just tell us a little bit about.
Well, the equine industry has been, it's kind of funny, the equine industry actually is one of the, I guess, really, Woodford County is one of the founding parts of the thoroughbred business, just because of a horse called Lexington, if nothing else. He came from Woodford, or Woodburn Farm, which was the Alexander's old farm out on Old Frankfort Pike, excuse me. And it's now part of Airdrie. It was all part of Libby's family's farm originally. When I was a kid, it was Dr. Alec Alexander. It was general farming then. And it's a beautiful home out there. But anyway, a horse called Lexington, who was the leading sire, I made some notes on him. He was actually the most famous, probably famous racehorse in the history of this area. He lived from 1850 to 1875. And he was the leading sire in North America for the longest period of any horse at that time, 1864 to 1874, and 1876 and 1878. Those are both posthumous years. But he was totally blind. That's another interesting thing. Now his father was a horse called, or his sire, which in the horse business we call sire, was a horse called Boston. And Boston was actually just right down Spring Station Road from him. And that was the old Aquira farm, which was owned by, in fact, Helen had the book I was really interested to see with Judge Blackburn, and he stood there, but it turned out he had failing eyesight too when he was older, so Lexington had to retire from racing because of his failing eyesight. But the last years of his career breeding, or most of his career breeding, he was totally blind. So that was an interesting tidbit there. Then there was the Nantura Stock Farm, which was, those are probably the two biggest areas with Aquira. Those are the three main old farms that I know of back dating from that time. And that was a really famous, that was one of the biggest farms around here. I guess anybody that goes out West Stevens Street, where it turns into Spring Station, if you go on out, there's a little lane called Harper Lane. And that was for Mr. Harper that owned, at that point in time, the Nantura Stock Farm. It entered back that way, and you go back there. And when I was a kid, you can't do it anymore, but I'd take people back. There was an old graveyard back there. And there's two really famous horses back there. Longfellow and Tinbrook are buried back there. And it's an enclosed graveyard. If you ever get a chance or get permission, I'm not sure who owns the farm. You get to it from Old Frankfort now. Who?
Marvin Mitchell.
Oh, that's what I thought it was one of Mitchell's. I wasn't sure which one, but it's Marvin. But
no. Marvin Mitchell.
No, it's Marlon Mitchell. Okay, but anyway, if you get permission, it's it's kind of neat. It's a fenced off area with the kind of iron posts around it, and they had I guess the old tombstones are back there, and it has Longfellow and Tenbrook on there, and it has little stories about them. There were old horses that used to be, I guess, iron horses that were on top of them, or steel. I guess they were iron back then. But they were on top of the tombstones. I think those are long gone. But if you ever get a chance, that's probably some of the budding history. And I think they lived, I guess, Longfellow, who's buried there, was the sire of 2 Kentucky Derby winners, Leonidas in 1883 and Riley in 1890. And Tenbrook, he lived from 1872 to 1887. That's where he's buried. But the Harper family, I guess they moved to Kentucky from Pennsylvania. I looked this up in 1795, so that's how long they've been here. Then I guess Helen comes from a very famous farm over here. It was the Parish farm at that point in time. And I guess it was your great-grandfather?
Uncle, great-great-uncle.
Great-great-uncle that first had it. And Bozart gave me some interesting information tonight. He said, you have to tell us that I learned when he had it, they were into quarter horses at that time before they got into thoroughbreds. And they had a mare that was the dam of a horse called Three Bar that turned out to be, he is the foundation of the sire lines of all the quarter horse industry. So there is something from Midway. Helen can probably tell you more about that. She knows more about it than I do. But it's kind of funny. I was going back when I was a kid. The farms I really remember, there weren't many, and most of the farms were actually centered up here in northern Woodford County. You had us, many people didn't grow, horses were a lot smaller crop, and the farms that did have was just another crop. When I grew up, I mean, we had horses, one crop, we grew a lot of tobacco, we'd strip bluegrass, I guess we'd grow some hay, we'd grow some corn for a cattle feed, we'd run steers, we'd go buy those and then sell them in the fall. So we did, it was really a mixed bag of agriculture back when I grew up, and our farm started out as like 400 acres, and by the time my father and uncles were through, it was almost 1,100. And then since deaths and everything, I'm down to 150. So, and I'm all horses. Well, I still grow a little alfalfa, and we grow wheat for straw, but then we'll bale a lot of grass for grass bedding. But back then we'd do all that too, and you put up that, and we try to be as self-sufficient as possible still. But it's funny, all these farms were basically general farms, and horses were just another crop. So, but the ones I grew up with, Dr. Smizer West, who was a dentist, not a horse vet, but he had Milford over here, or not Milford, Waterford, excuse me, and he grew up there. He was, his wife, Catherine, now help me on this, Helen, she was,
Martin.
She was a Martin, and so she and Miss Buster were sisters, but Mac Miller's, that the other sister that she was married to Mac's, or she was, is that right? Mac Miller's sister, or wife, wasn't she a Martin as well?
Mm-mm.
Or how was Mac related to, Mac was related to the
He was
West?
Smizer's best friend.
I thought they were related too, weren't they?
Was Mac Miller related to Smizer West?
No, they were best friends.
Just best friends,
They
okay.
were partners.
Well, they were partners on some really good
They owned
horses.
together.
What about Mac's wife?
Was she related to the Martins at all? For some reason, I thought there was a marriage connection.
Catherine was a Martin.
What about Mac Miller's wife?
Was she a Martin?
No.
Okay, then I didn't know that.
No, she was a collie.
Okay, so she was from Versailles. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so that didn't go too far away. Mac Miller grew up. In fact, it was kind of fun because Mac Miller was probably one of the premier horse. Well, I better go back to Woody Stevens first.
He grew up in Versailles.
Yep, he sure did, because he knew, Hampton Hinton, Mac, Dad, Charlie, all of them went to Bowles School together when they were kids. They got shipped out here to military school. It was military back then. That was to straighten them up, I guess. I don't know if it helped much, but anyway, that's another story. But anyway, let me go over the farms I knew first, and I'll get to Woody Stevens. But I guess Waterford Farm was out there with Dr. West, and he was another breeder. Hurstland Farm was a breeding farm at that point in time. That was before it was divided into Knuckles Farm and Hurstland. Then there was Bill Clark, and that was Highland Farm, I think, out here on Lansing Lane. He was out there at that point in time. Then there was Parish Hill with the Roach family. And then there was Sycamore Farm, which was the Hagen family over off US 60. It's back, I keep wanting to call it Pisgah Pike, but it's the one that goes the other, you turn right.
Shannon Run.
Shannon Run, thank you, it's off Shannon Run back there. And of course, Mr. Hagen, he was the second president of Keeneland, he was married to Alma Hagen, who was Healy, Healy's daughter, Mr. Healy's daughter. And Mr. Healy was the first president of Keeneland, so Mr. Hagen, who came from the Hagen farm, I guess it was on the north side of Lexington.
Spendthrift?
No, it wasn't Spendthrift, it's now Brilliant now. I'm trying to-
Allendorf?
It wasn't, I forgot what he called it. The columns are still there. Remember they burnt
She's
that?
saying Elmendorf.
It is Elmendorf?
The engine was green.
That was all part of Elmendorf at that point in time? Okay, because Elmendorf is still there, but anyway, that was where he was from originally, but that was where his father was from. But anyway, Mr. Hagen was the second president of Keeneland. And another famous Woodford Countian was the third president of Keeneland, that was James Bassett. So he and Lucy still had, well, Mrs. Bassett unfortunately is not with us anymore, but they have a farm back over off of, is it off Aiken Road back in there?
On Old Frankfurt.
Yeah, it's off Old Frankfurt, but you turn
And-
left.
Yeah,
It's,
Aiken is one of the borders.
yeah, but it's right back, yeah, it's before you get to Aiken Lane, it's there on the left.
What about the Waldens?
Oh, well, the Waldens were agriculture. I mean, Mr. Walden, that was Julian Walden, and he pretty much did tobacco. He was one of the biggest, this was back when Kentucky was probably the premier bluegrass growing state in the country. And that was before we brought in fescue and everything else. But all the pastures you see around here were all Kentucky bluegrass. I mean, everybody had bluegrass everywhere. When I was a child, that was one of the things I did when I was 11 years old, was sit on a bluegrass stripper. And you'd hook about 3 of them at an angle and you'd go down, and they were kind of like well, they're almost like a gleaner, only they didn't have cutting heads. They had heads that just squeezed the seed off, and you had steel conveyors on chains that would pull it up and dump it in a big bin. And then when you got to the end of when those bins got filled, you'd stop, and we had big burlap bags, and had a back square thing. You'd hook the burlap bag on there, you'd get in there with your hands and get it all out, fill the burlap bags, get back in, go around and fill a few more times, and strip more bluegrass. And we'd take all that over to Mr. Walden's right there on the corner of Old Frankfurt and 62. And he had a place back there, and we'd dump it all and he'd let it dry and everything, and he'd take it to Lexington, process it, and then it'd be bagged and sold as bluegrass seed. So that was one of the big things I remember from Mr. Walden, but he also grew a lot of tobacco. Everybody around here grew tobacco. Tobacco was basically the staple crop of this area, and pretty much all of central Kentucky. The best tobacco farms are all in this area. And Rick Horn back here still grows a lot of it. So I guess, are you still in it this year?
I'm still there, yeah. I never did get very far.
And then from the cattle business, I guess James Newell can give you a big talk about that, but Sarah, I guess, Sarah's father and his father had Hicks Brothers, which was out on 421, and I guess, when I first remember Nisha and Bob Hicks, when we'd stop by with your grandmother to pick you up to go to school in the mornings, they lived in Susie Shoemaker's house out here, and of course you put the swimming pool in. That's where my cousin Jimmy and I, you were kind enough to let us come out there and take a bath after work. We'd all go swimming. We'd change and run out there and go swimming. But no, Midway's a fun little town. It's always been, I know it grew up around the railroad, and it's all based on the railroad. And that gets me back to Woody Stevens. There's one little story I got to tell about Woody Stevens. Because Woody Stevens was actually born in Stanton, Kentucky, but he grew up pretty much on Parish Hill Farm, and he was riding horses when they broke and trained horses over there. And Woody always had a big connection to Midway. In fact, anytime he'd come down to the farm he had Mr. Russ Reinman was a big client of his at that point in time. And he was good friends with Dad and Charlie, and when he'd stop by the office, and he'd always tell everybody, yeah, I was so famous right here, they named the street for me, W. Stevens Street. So that's Woody Stevens Street. So that was Woody's favorite story about Midway. Yeah, anytime you go out West Stevens Street, just think of W. Stevens, Woody Stevens Street. But and then, of course, Mac Miller was the other really famous trainer from here, and he trained for some wonderful people. In his in fact, he trained a couple of horses for Dad and Charlie when they were younger, a lot younger, after they graduated from college, I guess, and just getting started out after the war. And anyway, he went on to train for, I guess, the two biggest clients he probably ever had, other than Cane Hoy's stable early on. He trained for Mr. Charles Englehart, who was a very, very wealthy gentleman. He owned a horse called Majinski that was champion, undefeated up until one race. In fact, when he lost in Europe, I've forgotten which race it was now. It might have been the Arc de Triomphe. But anyway, made him cry. That was the first time, and he was one of the greatest sires ever lived. He was the son of a Northern Dancer, who was another story, but he was basically a Maryland horse and finished up in Canada. But anyway, Mike Miller trained for Mr. Englehart, and then after that, after Mr. Englehart's death, he trained for Mr. Paul Mellon, which was another wonderful job, and they won the Kentucky Derby. And unfortunately, a horse I bred that year ran into Kentucky Derby, and if I hadn't won, I had to pull for Mac because he had Sea Hero in there for Mr. Mellon. Mr. Mellon by that time was in his 80s, and it was really fun. In fact, let me see, that was the 1993 Kentucky, or 1993 Kentucky Derby. So that was when Mac finally won the Kentucky Derby.
Which was your horse?
It was Truth of All. He got this little piece of brass, this little hardware. I went up to Canada to pick this up. He was named champion 2-year-old in Canada. So this is called a Sovereign Award, and this is what Canada gives out for the championships up there. It's kind of the equivalent of the Eclipse Award, only it's kind of like the poor little red-headed stepson. It's not quite as good, but it's still, you know, you're very proud when you get this. And then back here is another, this was for a champion handicap mare, I think it was 1973, called Typecast. And she was the first mare ever, it was 1973, presented to the Knuckles Brothers Breeders' Typecast. She was Kentucky Bred Horse of the Year in 1972, National Champion Handicap Mare, and Best Kentucky Bred Filly Mare on Grass. And she was quite a mare. We'd sold her. She was the first mare ever to beat males in $300,000 races. They were all turf races. She won the first two in New York and California. Then came to New York and won the Man of War, which was the biggest grass race at the time, and beat all the boys doing that, so we were always very proud of her. Fletcher Jones out of California owned her, and unfortunately he died in a single plane crash, private single-seating plane out in California, and they dispersed his estate. My father and uncles went out to California at that point in time to try to buy a typecast back for a broodmare. And I think they went out there, I don't know, with like $250,000, which was a whole lot of money back at that point in time. Never even got to bid on her. She went for a whole lot of money, and she ended up going to Japan. So that's probably where she died, is over there, because that's by then she'd be long gone. But anyway, we had her mother. It was a mare called Journalette. And the last foal she had typecast, and she had a little filly called Society Column that I guess Laddie Dance and his wife Jenny Vance bought from us, and at the Keeneland July sales, and the day after they bought her, we had a bad lightning storm over here in Journalette, and her foal by Bold Ladd, who was the son of Bold Ruler at that point in time, was struck dead and killed by lightning. So Jenny and Laddie offered to rescind the sale and give us back her as if we wanted to keep her, just because they knew she was the last female member we had of that family, and they said no, go ahead and take her. And she ended up being a stakes winner, a very nice producer, and a good broodmare for them. So there have been a lot of good horses. In fact, Helen comes from Charismatic, was born across the road. He was a Kentucky Derby winner foaled there out of Valley Babe. And of course, Mabel Jinsky was over there for some clients of Earall's, and she had Sky Beauty, who was a wonderful, she was a champion thoroughbred filly, best 3-year-old filly of her year. So there were some very, very nice horses that came off of that farm. And I guess back then you all grew a lot of tobacco and everything then, because I remember watching it go over the fence. So, then there was an interesting graveyard. I guess they plowed it up when you all sold it, but right in the corner behind, you know, where the creek and the spring pond is, that where it comes across there, there was an old family graveyard up on that hill, and there were headstones there forever. I remember one year there was a tree that blew over, and there was a skull in it.
Oh my gosh.
And so I kind of took it out, and there was a hole kind of there, so I kind of pushed it back in the hole because I figured that's where it came from. So, little tidbits of Woodford County. I still don't know. The tombstones were all so weathered you couldn't even read the names on them. So those were very old. They probably went back to the mid-1700s, late 1700s, maybe early 1800s. But there's a lot of family history in this area, and I guess the Hicks have been a good part of it. Heck, I guess the Horns have grown up around here because we all played Little League Baseball together. So we did that, and of course Bill Clark he was one of the coaches of Little League Baseball we were playing with, so he was quite a character. What other farm people were involved in that? Do you remember, Ricky? Anybody, any other farm guys that were involved in stuff we were growing up? Most of them just worked. I don't guess the men did that much back then, except work and talk about work.
Alfred, how did the Knuckles get started up there? Do you know?
Well, it started out with Dr. Alfred Hurst. That's where our family name comes. That's why it's Hurstland. Mm-hmm. And he came here. He had, from what I've been told and the way I understand it, he had an original land grant farm over in on the, I guess, south side of Versailles. And he was a medical doctor, and And I'm not sure which one of these it was, but he's either teaching at the University of Louisville or the University of Cincinnati. He was teaching medical, and he wanted to be close to the railroad so he could take the train back and forth. And so he swapped the farm there for what was over here. And then he had a daughter named Betty Hurst who married Claiborne Knuckles. I think it's Claiborne. You go back, there's Claiborne and Claiborne. I don't know. But anyway, Claiborne and his brother Sam were over there, and so they had that part of the farm. I guess Claiborne must have had this over here. But anyway, Claiborne had 3 sons. He had Alfred Hurst Knuckles, who was my father's uncle. He was the youngest circuit judge that was ever in Woodford County. I remember hearing that growing up. Then there was my grandfather, Charles Knuckles Charles Knuckles, Sr. And then there was Sam, I believe Sam Knuckles might have been the third one, but there were 3 brothers. And so then take the Charles Knuckles tree and you come down, there's Charles Knuckles my grandfather was the father of Alfred and Hiram and Charles Jr. And that was where we came from. So that was how Hurstland came from the original 410 acres my grandfather had. And they grew it up to be almost 1,100 acres back when we were in our prime, and the horses and tobacco, you couldn't do anything wrong. You could do nothing but make money farming back then. So no mortgages, just money, good cash flow, great clients, lots of crops. Fun place to grow up when you're a child. I don't know if any of you have ever had the ability to visit farms when you're kids or not, but farms were always interesting. Our parents would just turn us loose, and I'd tramp through the creek that comes from my spring. We'd follow it across in front of Helen's house where she grew up, take it, heck, you could follow it on under 421, take it all the way over to Elkhorn Creek. So we did that for one field day. I think I was about 8 or 9. The parents didn't know we went quite that far. But there were old spring caves we'd climb back into, and we'd hike around here. Of course, we had, it was just a different time. But farms allowed you to do a lot of things. And of course, when you're a kid, you always wanted to work on the farm, do farm stuff, because you watch the big guys do it, and they'd throw the bales on the wagons and the trucks, and they'd drive the tractors and the balers, and then you always want to emulate those guys. So that was a lot of fun, but that's where I started out. And in fact, but I enjoyed horses so much more that the next year I asked my father, when I turned 12, I asked my father, by then I was getting paid $6 a day. I was up to full wages then, because I did a really good job with a weed hook. That was where they had weed eaters. And we'd clean out fence rows of those and chop out tobacco and bale hay, and I'd drive the tractor on the hay things because I couldn't handle the hay bales. But anyway, the next year I just loved the horses so much. I asked, just please let me work with the horses this summer while I'm at school. And he said, well, I don't think you're big enough for that. But if you want to do it, if you'll take a pay cut down to $5 a day, we'll let you do that. So, this is how smart I was in the horse business. So anyway, I started working with the horses then, and I've been working with them pretty much summers the rest of my life until I graduated from college and law school. And then after I practiced law for a few years, I came back and have been doing it ever since. So that's enough of me talking. I guess the parents were going to talk about him, so I'm going to sit down.
Wait a minute. Tell about your colors. Tell yourself.
I brought these. I didn't know if anybody, these are actual jockey silks. This is what the jockeys wear. I mean, people see the little miniature. And this is the cap cover they put on their helmet. And this is what the silks look like. And of course, ours were purple and gold. And I guess I was trying to figure out why it was the belt across here, but I think if you look at it, it makes an H. So I don't know if that's why my grandfather chose the colors like this, or he just wanted a belt across there. But anyway, these are the colors. You'll see these at Keeneland maybe once in a blue moon. We've had some good luck at Keeneland over the years. In fact, my children and I won a nice graded stakes race at Keeneland. I ran this filly right here, ran in the Alcibiades. I didn't know if anybody ever seen these saddle claws, but this is what they put on them where the saddles go over them. And this is one from the grade 1 Alcibiades stake, which is the big 2-year-old stakes at Keeneland. And she ran second to Stephanie's Kitten. But it's kind of interesting. If you see in here, there's a place right here. This is a chip in here so they can track them. They have that thing on called Trackus where you can watch, the races and show you little, I guess, the kind of monitor or the cartoon type thing where the horses are. And that's how they track them. The chip is in here so they can know where the horse is. So when you get it off, but this is what all the horses, in fact, this still has the original boot black and everything on it from Edgar Prado when he rode her that day. But this is what the saddle cloths are that go underneath, and then you'll put the pommel cloth and pommel blanket on, and you'll put the saddle over that. So this is just, we were very proud of this filly.
Hey, Alfred, I'd like to ask you one question based on your many years of experience. How would you say the horse industry is doing these days? I know there was a time when there was some fear about it in the area.
It's not as strong as it used to be, Grace. I mean, it's, right now, it's become a very sales-oriented business. When I grew up, you had, when I was a lot younger, a lot of people bred their own horses and raced them. Commercial breeding wasn't much at all. I mean, the Keeneland July sales were 2 days. You'd sell on Monday afternoon, Monday night. Each farm had what day they sold. We were always Tuesday night. Mr. Combs was always Monday night. We were one of the bigger commercial breeders at that point in time. And there weren't many of them. And then the fall sales was like 2 days, and the November sale were like 2 days, and January sale was like 1 day. And those were the only sales out there. And now it's become such a commercial market. The foal crop grew up to where it was over 40,000 foals. Now we're down to right around 20,000. So foal crops dropped, but unfortunately so is the pool of buyers. So there's not nearly the number of buyers out there, or if there are buyers, it's instead of one buyer buying multiple horses, multiple buyers going and partnering up buying one horse. And that's, a lot has to do with the cost of training. I mean, if you're racing a horse in New York, it's upwards of $100 a day. That's before veterinary and farrier. And when you run in a race, if you're lucky enough to either run first, second, or third, I guess the winner's portion, say of a $100,000 stake race, would be $60,000. Now it's back to 55% up there. It used to be 60%, as it used to be the standard, which would be $60,000. And now that's $60,000 to the winner. The jockey gets 10%, and the trainer gets 10%. So there's another 12 off. So you're paying all these bills, and all of a sudden you're down to $48,000 instead. Everybody thinks it looks so great, but it's not as much money. And by the time, if you don't win a couple of races a year, you don't really pay the way of these horses. But I think, and the buying market's become tougher. They came up with something back in the late 70s called the repository. And they made everybody that was selling horses start taking x-rays of all the different joints from the knees down. They do the knees, ankles, or fetlocks, whatever you want to call them. Then they do the hocks behind and the rear ankles. And there's 32 views of those or 36 views of those that are on for review. Now they do them, they used to do them on plates, and that was really something, trying to get all that done. Now it's all done through electronic data that's downloaded on, they're downloaded directly over there.
Does the breeder still pay for all of it?
The breeder still pays for all that. If you use Haggard, Davidson, McGee as your veterinarian to get your sales x-rays done and get the other thing you have to do is have an endoscopic exam of the horse's throat, which is where they take a little fiber optic tube and they go down to watch the arytenoids and make sure they swallow and the arytenoids can fully abduct and hold so they can really get a full breath when they're racing. But if you do that and you use them, it's $567. $500 for the x-rays, $67 for the sales scope. And then of course now, if you have horses you think are good enough for say select sales, which are like Phasig July, the first couple of days, the first 4 days of Keeneland September, Phasig Tipton Saratoga, those select sales, if you have horses you think are good enough for those, you'll generally do what we call survey films, and we'll generally do those into February 1st to March just to make sure these horses look good on x-ray. Then if they don't, it gives us time to maybe remove a chip or straighten up a problem, or just say, well, this horse isn't going to make the sales, we're going to have to race it ourselves or make a broodmare or something else out of it. But it just gives us, it's become very competitive because of the repositories. When you go to the sales, and because of the views they get, and now because of these breeding books, which is a whole other thing, but there's so many mares bred to the same stallions anymore that if you don't have one of the top 10 that hits the repository, gets clean, I mean, the hoops you have to jump through to sell a top price horse are just unbelievable. You have to have clean x-rays, you have to have good confirmation, which is a correct horse as far as the way people perceive a correct horse. They watch them walk, they'll have a vet scope them again, just because nobody's going to take your word on the scope. They'll have someone review the x-rays, and then now if they like a horse, they may bring them in and get heart scans done of them. They'll come in, they'll have an outfit, Dr. Lambert down here on the corner of Railroad Street in 62. They do that. But they'll do the heart scans, they'll come back in. Gosh, people pull hair samples, do DNA tests to try to figure out whether they have slow twitch, fast twitch muscles. It's, you can take this as far, you can break it down as many grounds as you want, but a lot of, these are all different little hoops you jump through. So if you have one of the top, these horses bring $1 million, don't get there by accident. I mean, the only accident is you happen to pick the right sire 3 years ago, because when we start doing this, I'm picking stallions right now, and I haven't already picked them all. I've still got several to go, but I've made decisions back in November of 18 for horses I'm breeding in 19. They'll have a foal in 2020, and we'll probably either sell those things. If I sell them as weanlings, it'll be late 2020, but most of them will go as yearlings the following year, which the sale season starts in July. So either go July Phasig, Saratoga August, Phasig Saratoga, or else you come back for Keeneland Select, and if you aren't good enough for those, you go in the back books of Keeneland or Phasig October. So these horses get sold more than once. That's another thing you were asking. Used to just horses that go through one time. Now they'll go through as weanlings. They have what they call pin hookers. These are people that buy horses on speculation to resell them in a later sale. So they'll buy these young ones, what we call weanlings, which are horses that have been weaned that prior summer off the mare. Those are sold in the fall of their year they're weaned, the year they're born. So those horses can be bought as a weanling, resold as yearlings. That horse can be purchased a yearling, run through the 2-year-old sales down in Florida, and then if that doesn't work, they can come back and go through the November sales, a racing prospect or a broodmare prospect. These horses go through, it's just unbelievable how many times these horses go through sales. And we used to breed to try to build families, so we didn't sell a lot of mares. A lot of people now breed, they'll breed the first year horses, turn the mares, go out, buy another one, breed, and do it like that. And nothing against first year stallions, but in the breeding business, the stallions, only about, out of the ones that are retired, probably maybe 1 in 10, 2 in 10 might be useful horses. That leaves you 80 to 90% that are going to be total duds. And out of those that are useful, another 1 out of 10 of those will be very good stallions. So you're talking about, out of these horses retired, only 1 out of 100 is probably going to be, and that could be over 2 or 3 years by the numbers. And horses like Tappet, Warfront, those are horses that don't just come up every day. Those are successful sires, and it takes a while to build those up. Some of them are total freaks. I mean, Warfront, nobody would have ever dreamed he would have. He was the son of Danzig, and Woody Stevens, that grew up over here, trained Danzig, and Danzig only raced 4 times, broke down. He was totally unsound, had front end on him. It looked like, it just didn't line up. I mean, knees came down, he'd go out like, he had splints. He was just terrible conformation in front. And Woody always said he was the fastest horse he'd ever trained, and people need to breed to him. And you go look at him, he's the crookedest horse you'd ever seen. He might have been the fastest, and I think that was one of the reasons he didn't stay sound. But anyway, a lot of people that were smart bred to him made a whole lot of money. Mr. DeFiakowski that bought Calumet bred a lot of horses at Danzig. He owned part of Danzig. He had Danzig-a-lot, and he had some really nice luck there. And of course, sons of Danzig have done very well at stud. If you look at Warfront, who's one of the leading sires, actually he's 300,000 now, maybe a little more than that to breed to this year. They raised him up. So he's very expensive. Yes.
KET had a special on horses last night.
Oh, no, a week ago.
And they were talking about how with the sires breeding to so many mares, is there a chance that the breed will start to have recessive genes crop up and weakening of the breed lines?
That's a problem you have now because of these horses that are breeding. I mean, a real no-no used to be not to inbreed to Mr. Prospector, because you never knew Mr. Prospector could get you a horse. He could get you really long pastures. He might get you straight shoulder. He was very fast. He was so successful. He moved up from Florida, then he ended up staying at Cleveland Stud and was one of the leading thoroughbreds sires of my generation growing up in there, along with Bold Ruler and those horses. But Cleveland's had an awful bunch of good sires. But anyway, if you inbreed to him, I mean, you've got sons of his out there and grandsons. You go back through Unbridled, through Fapiano comes down through Unbridled. He had gone west. Oh gosh, I mean, you have more sons of, I'm trying to think of other sons of Unbridled. You have Distorted Humor, of Mr. Prospector, Distorted Humor, who have been very successful. And you go down to the next generations. I mean, it's very, but because they're breeding all these books of mares, like you're saying, the same mares starting to go to stallions and have the same pedigrees, and you can't get away from them. We used to be able to outcross and go to Australia or something, but the numbers now, On these larger farms, the most popular horses, a stallion, it's not uncommon for them to breed upwards of 200 mares now. So horses like American Pharaoh, I think he bred 220 last year, which I don't know how to do it. You got to be over at 2 o'clock in the morning. And they were breeding him 3 and 4 times a day. And that's why some of these horses lose a little interest after a while. And if that isn't good enough, they take them and send them down to either South America or Australia for dual hemisphere. They'll send them for our summer months, or spring and summer months. As soon as the breeding sheds close here in June, they go to Southern Hemisphere and they'll breed down there for their breeding season, and they come back up here and do it all over again. Poor guys that get up here in the fall, they get up here in like December, and all the horses up here have hair, and you can tell these, they don't have any hair. They're under blankets, they're shivering and everything else. So they really maximize the use. This is what I'm saying, you can't get away from those gene pools anymore because they're going to different countries. They're breeding mares out there where you used to go to get outcrosses for hybrid vigor and all that, and you just can't do it anymore because all this pedigree pops up in the same stallions. So I think genetically, yes, and if you listen to that, they said the reason it was called thoroughbreds was because they closed the book and wouldn't let any other different breeds, because the thoroughbreds came from some of the English horses, the Arabs, and originally those were brought in, and you know, if you go back, the Barley Turk, the Godolphin Arabian, and who's the third one? Anyway, there were 3 Arab stallions that were pretty much the key, and those are the keys to all the ancestors of thoroughbreds this day and age. So all your thoroughbred horses trail from those 3 males, and it's pretty much, let's see, the Barley Turk, Godolphin Arabian, that was the other one. And Godolphin Arabian, Barley Turk, and the Darley Arabian, maybe that was the 3. But there were 3 of them, and those are the foundations for the thoroughbred industry as we know it today. After they quit crossbreeding those, they closed the book. That's why they call it thoroughbreds. And if you'd seen it the week before, they had a really good thing on Dr. Lambert was on there for quite a bit.
Oh, yeah?
Did you see it the week before? Mm-hmm. That was really good because they had Dr. Lambert on there talking about the biomechanics and everything of horses. So. Okay, is that enough on horses? I thought you all were supposed to talk about it.
No, we want to hear James Hicks.
No, good.
I
Whatever.
invited a lot of people and promised I wouldn't put you on the spot, but.
Alfred does such a good job.
He did a wonderful job.
Well, it depends. He's the best
I would love to
historian.
hear more about the other side of farming, other things. So do you mind just telling us a little bit of history behind your farm and what you do?
Well, I don't know, they should probably help me a little bit. Well, I'll try.
Help you.
James Hicks, it goes back to my Aunt Nisha. Her husband and my father had a cattle business loaded. We were located out on Leestown Road. In 1945, they started, I think it was probably one of the first Angus herds in the state, wasn't it, Nisha?
Well, they grew Angus cattle from the time they were children,
Right.
but they didn't start the partnership until then.
And we've progressed since then. We now have 3 breeds. And we still operate part of the same farm. The other part is the part where Susie lives, Susie Shoemaker. But my sister and I and our spouses, we have Angus herd, limousine herd, and also we just incorporated a red Angus herd. Been pretty successful the last 20 years. We show quite a bit. The kids all grew up through the show ring. I think probably one of our biggest achievements, we've won multiple state fair shows. And then more recently, we had the Reserve National Champion for the Red Angus, so that was a huge accomplishment we had this year. But I don't know, like I said, we grew up in the cattle business our entire life. In the late 80s, our family purchased the stockyards in Lexington, and I ran it for, I guess, 11 years. That's why I'm all gray haired.
Too many horses, or too many cattle running down Main Street, weren't there?
Yep. On top of the breeding operation, we also incorporate a lot of the horse farms. We run steers on a lot of the horse farms, so we'll keep anywhere from, like this herd out here is around 150 mother cows, and then we'll keep usually 500 to 600 steers just scattered around on different farms, just grazing the pastures. I keep hearing Alfred, he was talking about the farming industry, and back when Knuckles started, you were talking about how diverse y'all were.
Yeah.
And I think I look back in my history, I can remember it being real diverse, and now we've kind of we're single-minded, like I'm strictly cattle,
I'm
you're
strictly
probably
horses.
strictly horses.
Rick's strictly tobacco.
And
Well, now alfalfa.
No, he does.
and a lot of, I think back here in the, the struggles that we've all had, and it's probably, I think so, and I go back to tobacco, and when the tobacco went out of this country, it's really put an economic hardship on a lot of these farmers, and
That's where hopefully the hemp industry is going to
you've,
help some.
yeah, the hemp industry might be the answer to it. We've residential development has helped quite a bit, so we're able to sell these farmland. I'm trying to think when I was growing up, a lot of farmland around here bring $2,500 an acre, and it's probably worth what?
Well, it depends, anywhere from 11, depending on where you are, maybe 10 to 11,000, maybe
Yeah.
up to upwards of 20.
And if it's in residential development, it may bring,
You can sell it by the square foot, yeah.
so it's, been kind of a bailout, so we're really kind of cautious of watching agriculture in this area. And it's a struggle for a lot of farmers to kind of hang on to the farm, because there's no real easy cash crop. As Alfred talks about the horse industry, cattle industry is similar to it. We do a lot of our breeding livestock goes back to people that have cow herds. We sell bulls to them, but we don't have it's not a get-rich program to start, no. But
You probably heard the same thing I did growing up. My father used to tell me, farming's a great life, it just ain't much of a living.
yeah. I was trying to think back on some of the history of Midway, and I had one little fun fact. Does anybody know where the Lexington Polo Club started?
I used to go to the matches.
Yeah. Anybody have any idea?
Is that over near Elkhorn Creek?
It started right out here on out on Winter Street, right where we live. It's right across from the old school.
Oh, really?
A fellow by the name of Charlie Black had kept his polo
I forgot
ponies.
about Charlie being over
Kept
here.
his polo ponies up at our parents' barn, and he was a professional player for Louisville. And he started on Sundays. He would get my dad and his partner, Dr. Baker. I'm trying to think who else. Bruce Hunley,
Yeah.
Hampton Hinton, Hoppy Hinton. They'd come out, and if they didn't have a horse, he'd put them on a horse. And they sit out there, and kids, we'd all get the polo balls, and if they smack them and they went underneath the fence and rolled across Winter Street, we'd go over and get the balls. And next thing you know, here comes the governor says he's bought this piece of land up there, and they're going to call it the Kentucky Horse Park. And he says, well, what we'll do is we'll just take this and we'll move this polo deal up to the horse park. So what's the big indoor arena up there now? Yeah, the Alltech Arena. That's where the polo field was. So Midway moved their polo club, which is now called the Lexington Polo Club, to that piece of property. And they got a 99-year lease on that piece of property. I don't know how all this handles in court. But as long as they mowed the property, they got to use the property for 99 years. So we can actually claim stake to that Alltech Arena up there for one.
Well, they moved it to the front of the polo fields.
Yeah, it's up there.
Stop Ironworks now.
I think the first time they had it up there, they charged $1 to gain entry into it. And I think I collected, I don't know, $55 or something. And then, I don't know, I think after about 3 years, it was clear up to, I think they were making over $300. And then they took me off to collecting money, and I think the state started collecting it, and they built the new polo field.
What'd you do with all that money?
Yeah, that's what I need to keep all of it.
That's why they took it away, that's why they took you off.
But I laugh, I think about Alfred, they talk about that Knuckles property. When I was a kid, there was a family here in town, the Pennies, you remember the Penny family?
Yeah.
Well, I was just a little kid, and I'd playing out in the yard, and the Pennies were coming across your all's property, and they had the tobacco sticks, and they had I didn't know if they were little groundhogs that they'd shot off these horse farms, and they had them strung up on the tobacco stick. And I asked them, I said, what do you got? And they said, they're baby bear cubs. So there's a whole den of them back there on the Knuckles property. So I told my dad, I said, you know, this is crazy. I said, the Knuckles, they've got bear over there on their farm.
Who did you listen to? Marshall?
Yeah, it was
Marshall.
Marshall.
That'd come from. Marshall's crazy than Junebug anyway.
Yeah. But anyway, we still operate the farm there on Leestown, and, you know, I guess until I pass away, I
You
guess
think
I...
your kids will take over?
Yeah, I've got 3 children, and all 3 of them have shown cattle. They're all through their 4-H career. I still have 2 that are very active in it still, and they'll enjoy it. It's been a good way to get them started in the morning.
What's your best weight gainer? Which one? You say you got the Red Angus and you crossbreed any of them with limousines? Or
Well, we had the Angus, and then my brother-in-law worked for Shedwell Farm, and they had a limousine herd.
Yeah, they're right there on 421, you told me?
Then the sheik decided he wanted to sell out of the limousine cattle, so we incorporated some of the limousine into our herd, and then a lot of these breeds would cross. So the limousine and Angus crossed, and they become a breed called Limflex. So it's kind of the characteristics of both. You get the maternal of an Angus and the muscling of a limousine. It makes it kind of a good cross. So,
Good steak.
it is. Yeah.
Do you remember the stockyard downtown?
You know, I don't. That's probably.
Oh, downtown Midway?
I'm not as old as
Oh,
Albert.
that was down where the ice plant is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Do you
listening
remember,
to-
Mama? What? The stockyard in downtown Midway.
It wasn't a very big one.
Oh,
No.
it was here when I first married Bob, that was
I think they were-
1946.
Weren't the pins kind of about where the bank is right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Got a
the
picture of that.
Sexton Richardson had it. That was, Lewis and David Pruitt's grandfather.
But I thought where the ice plant
He
was
was a-
more of a packing
Well, that
plant.
was a packing plant, but the
Yeah.
stockyard
It
used
was
to be
back
right.
behind where the Darling Jeans is now.
Yeah, right down at the bottom.
I
All
don't
down
remember the
there where those
stockyards.
apartment buildings
Don't you remember
are.
that?
They
Was-
go
it
in
was-
bins.
I know, but
Maybe it was just,
you also Saratoga, right? I mean, did you load the horses down there?
no, I didn't, that was my grandfather. They had to load them here in Midway, because that's how they all went to Saratoga sales. by
See,
the way.
most of them, like
Until the war, and that's when Keenan started. when he
the
took-
stockyards in Lexington is more of a, it was more built more in like the 1940s. So all you had, all these little small towns like Midway, they would sell, farmers would bring them in here, they'd have maybe 30 or 40 head, buyers would buy them, and then they would in turn load them on the rail car, and they go to Lexington, unload them, and they would resell them again to different buyers who put them on.
There used to be a
Bigger
spur
railroad.
where
Yeah.
they had two tracks that went through Midway back then. And one of the tracks had a spur on it.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
came down beside where Darling Jeans is now, where the bank is.
Of course, where the bank is, used to be the old train station before they
That's
tore that
right.
down. and built
Right,
that.
that's where they loaded the livestock.
Remember watching the George Washington go through and the passenger train, and the mail car was always on the back, and watching that hook, and they'd pick up that mail bag hanging up there.
I don't know if there's any truth.
Boom, off
I
they
don't,
go.
there's all kinds of states to where the porterhouse steak came from, but we all know that it came from where our,
The porterhouse,
the
yeah.
porterhouse, that's how it got its name. And a lot of cattle buyers would come and
Doctor-
stay,
Yeah.
if they were in Midway for the sale, they would stay at, what we know as the porterhouse.
Margaret Porter that had that, Nisha? Was it Margaret Porter?
Yeah, that was where Dr. Moore's office was.
Yeah, it used to be, but my grandmother used to take us in there as kids. It was the most boring thing, sit down with a bunch of little old ladies drinking tea or whatever they were drinking.
But supposedly, the cut of steak that they call the porterhouse was started in,
Because it was a boarding house.
is that what it
Room-
was? Yeah.
rooming house.
Yeah, rooming
That's
house,
what I would
stuff
say,
like
yeah.
that. But Miss Porter still lived there, so.
Yeah. Mommy, was her name Margaret Porter?
And Margaret, that's what I thought, because that's who I remember when I was and my 6 and 7-year-old or something around there. Because my grandmother Nana would drag us in there.
And our librarian, she just bought our family home, which has been on our family for, how many years? 200?
God.
I'm gonna say, you'd have to go back to what the deeds, it's been on,
It's been a long time. Yeah, I think Jim Stark said it had been in the family for 135 years. But it's older than that, so.
That was your old family house?
yeah.
The Starks house was?
Yeah,
yeah.
we're Starks.
Yeah, because that was.
And I'm gonna tell you that all the doorknobs in the house are guaranteed to work. Because when I was little, I was about this so tall, and now I got a tool box for Christmas, and it had a screwdriver set in it. So everything was that size for all the doorknobs, so I went to the door and I take all the screws, took all the doorknobs apart in the house, so I don't know if they match anymore.
I bet you remember
And
loving
I put them all down.
I remember you loved your screwdrivers.
Yeah. So when
You
we
talking about
moved,
the ones with vodka and orange juice?
when we moved to the house we are at now, Daddy grabbed me and he said, now see, that's a doorknob and they stay on the door.
Did you teach Hurst how to do that? Did you teach Hurst how to take those? He had an electric screwdriver, and he got them all off in 30 minutes.
Okay.
I couldn't believe you had to rip your doorknob of the house off.
That's good to know. I think they're the original doorknobs, they've been on there.
Oh, yeah.
Are they all brass, or are they the glass type, or the brass?
There's some different ones.
It's different because I took
Yeah,
them
'cause
off
you-
and you can
He
see.
probably broke some of the glass was taking them off.
Anyway, that's the.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
And this is, I'm not from Midway, but I drive in every day and I'm just dying of curiosity. There's a farm when you come in from Leestown Road, and it's right across the street from the McDonald's, kind of right across the street from McDonald's, and they've got bison.
Oh, yeah.
But they also always used to have a camel, and I haven't seen that camel in a long time. Whose farm is
Yeah,
that?
that's Junior Phillips, yeah.
Okay.
It was,
Does anybody know what's up with that camel? That camel just intrigues me.
I think he passed away.
Oh.
Well, he
He had a couple of camels.
Yeah, I think he had, somebody had given him the camels, the llamas, and
Yeah,
he
yeah,
Yeah,
had
the llamas.
He had the bison,
Yeah.
and they sold everything. There was one calf that was left that the people didn't want. So there is, I think, one buffalo still there. He's kind of gotten a little bit bigger.
Boy, they built the thing out here in the corner. Wasn't that gonna be a meat plant or something?
I think he
What
had-
they originally were planning to do, and then.
But it was never to code, and if anyone knows Junior, I mean, he built it because he just built it, and they said, you can't build it, you have to have plans. He goes, sure. I gave him a piece of paper and drew up the squares and said, that's what I'm gonna build. And it was legal, but they said, well, you can't do anything with the public, you gotta go through, I don't know.
That's the buffalo.
No, wasn't that farm where the buffalo, it wasn't that your cousin's farm?
My dad, my granddaddy's
The
sister.
Wings.
Not the Wings, it was across the road, they were sisters, weren't they?
The Riker, you talking about the Rikers?
Yeah.
Ms. Riker had that part where the buffaloes are.
Yeah.
And then it was,
I think Miss Riker and Mr. Weems were sisters, weren't they?
Betsy Weems's mother was Kate Riker's sister.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they were Mamie Parrish's daughters. And she was the only parish girl. And she had the 3 parish brothers, Ben, Ike, and Jim. And she was the only girl.
Alfred, I have a question. You know where the Ingertons used to live?
Yeah, yeah.
And there are those 2 old houses, maybe you know, Helen, those 2 old structures down low. And I heard there was a cemetery over there. Do you know
I
anything?
would probably know that. That was in her family. That was old Emerson
Yeah,
property, which
it
is.
is it's from the Martin family,
Yeah.
but it's just James's parents.
That's where they're home?
That's where they were, yeah, she was born and married on that farm, and it was originally an Offutt tavern down there in the bottom.
Oh, it was a
And
tavern.
It was a tavern.
Stagecoach stop, I guess, down there, Ellen? Was it a stagecoach stop at that point in time?
Yeah, way back then.
And is there a graveyard
There is up on the hill, kind of, there's, I think, one tree there. Jimmy Knuckles is taking care of it.
Yeah, Jimmy has it, my cousin.
It's on his property?
Yeah, that's what he got when he
But
divided.
it, yeah, it
His
goes
father
back
died
to
in-
the Cole family.
I was wondering, I didn't know where that was. I was always thinking it was out there on the corner of 62 and Old Frankfurt, where the Co-Offic Tavern.
Well, you know, they were kin, the two taverns, the one
Okay, I
out on
didn't know
Old
that.
Frankfurt and the one down there, they were the same family,
Oh,
different
Cole
generations, I
Lawson.
think. But they were kin to the Martins out on the Waterford.
Zarelda Cole was the mother of Jesse James.
Right.
Yeah.
And Frank.
Yeah, and the Martins don't talk about it.
It's like Charles Manson was from Covington, Kentucky or something. I'm not gonna talk about that.
Can we hear from Rick?
What about Rick?
Yeah.
We see tobacco farm every
Come on up.
There's really not much to say about tobacco.
Plus, he's done truck farming though, too.
It's a dying little dying.
Look.
You get contracts with the companies and they control it all, so it's, you know, they give you tobacco or they don't, and, you know.
Talk about it growing up. Talk about how this used to be.
Oh,
And tell me which rail in the barn you used to go to. Did you go to the top two like me? I wanted to go to the
Did
top.
them all. We moved up here from Texas when I was 8. And my father got it through my grandfather farm about 1950, something like that. And so from 8 on, you know, my brother and I, we'd set tobacco all day and you know, then go to school. We didn't really house it. They got people to house it because we were in school. But when we graduated, you know, from high school, you know, I got it more into getting into the barn and stripping and all that stuff. But it was very labor intensive then. And
It's changed the way. Remember when we grew up, we were kids, you'd tie it in hands, which we
Yeah.
called a hand of tobacco.
yeah,
And of course, you'd grate it, and you'd have, a hand was as much as you get in a hand, and you get a wrapper leaf, wrap it around it,
About 1
run it
pound.
under.
When did they give the price support? When did you start receiving? Do you remember that?
2004. 2004?
When they bought it out.
price
No,
was-
not when they bought it out, but when they actually put a price support on it. In other words, it was,
I wouldn't.
would you have any idea?
I just, every time, I mean, I know from a little kid, I mean, they always controlled, it started out as an acre thing, you could only
Right.
grow X number of acres.
And
then
they measured-
I guess
they measured those acres.
people used to get these hybrid types of tobacco that could really produce, so they planted rows a little closer together.
Right.
And then they were getting all this, so tonnage off of the acres, so they went to a poundage system.
Was it as good a quality?
Well,
It was better quality.
it was better quality, but there were, you know, hybrids have come up in the tobacco business. Good gosh, it started out like, what was the big one?
Like 6 and 9.
Yeah,
And now they put them together.
And then there's some Tennessee varieties they
Yeah.
threw in there, and there were some, but there's some that are,
But your auction system, you actually had an auction.
Right.
And then it turned into more of
Right,
a
with the buyout.
allocation.
With the buyout.
but when the government supported it, there was a support price for each grade of tobacco.
Right.
And that's when we'd farm it, and we'd put it in our baskets and take it up there, and then.
But you're still at the buyer's mercy.
Yeah, but you're still at the buyer's mercy, but if it didn't, well, I guess if you got nog, you didn't get anything for it, no grade. Nog means no grade.
Right, the
But-
support price went to the co-op.
Yeah, the support price went to co-op, they'd take all tobacco, the tobacco go to the co-op, and then they'd sell it later when the companies really need tobacco and then anybody else to buy it. But it was, depending on the grade of tobacco, determine your price, and then depending on where it came from off the plant, like the tips, the lugs, and the flanks, the
Right.
3 grades. Actually, it used to have 4 or 5 grades,
Right.
and they broke it down to 3.
Are you still selling it like on Angliana, or
Yes, I am.
You
That's
still
that's where
sell-
Reynolds is.
do they still go down the road?
No, that's long past.
That's-
Now,
That's what he's talking about, that's
No.
the
yeah,
auction.
it's just Reynolds. That's the one company. So
It's no, it's,
each person has a contract. You know, you have a contract with them or you don't. They're getting ready to come out with the contracts next month, and they're talking about lowering the pounds they're gonna give you.
So they
again.
just tell you what they're gonna pay you?
Oh, yeah, they'll give you
Yeah.
a price support, what.
but it has to meet that
But
certain
you have to,
quality.
if you don't meet their specs, they don't buy
Right,
your
no, they don't
tobacco.
even buy it, no.
And then there's no one there to back it
Yeah.
up.
And
There's no,
then they'll cut
Do
you.
they still have auctioneers?
No?
They do at a couple of private places, in Danville, Mount Sterling. something like that. But not much, no.
But the Burley Co-op doesn't come in and buy up your.
No, the
something
Burley
that
Co-op
doesn't-
is still there, the people have contracts with them, but, I mean, their prices are really bad.
Yeah.
I noticed all those tobacco warehouses that were in Chevy, not in Metathorpe, down by the railroad tracks have all been removed.
Right,
Yeah, those were,
that was Vaughn, or that was
Yeah.
just storage,
they buy it,
East of
straight from
Woodrive.
process, yeah,
And
they
now it all
re-dry.
goes to North Carolina,
They put it in hogsheads there and ship it out.
yeah.
They were owned by the Vaughns.
And if you've
Yeah,
been on
those are-
Atlanta lately,
That's all housing.
The well-
UK.
And all UK apartments are where all the warehouses are.
And Reynolds Place, the Haynes, it's.
Yeah,
it's
that's
going
the
the
only
same way.
warehouse still there.
They're moving to Mount Sterling.
that's what, you get back into the beef cattle and.
And that was the other
tobacco.
stockyard was right across the road from there from Bluegrass. That was-
Beef cattle and tobacco always complemented each other
Mm-hmm.
because you could, on the.
Income
you had-
would come in
you
3
had
times a year.
Cows that would calve in the spring of the year, then you moved right into, burley, you'd set your tobacco,
Mm-hmm.
hay production, and so you could always keep a full-time man on.
Yeah.
Then you came in the fall of the year, was housing tobacco.
And now you can't get help.
Now you can't get help because,
You have to go-
it's,
You have
You
to go
need a visa to get
H2A.
it. Yeah.
workers.
How do you get your work done? It's still hand
And
labor.
it's still, I can get H2A. You go through the lawyers, and the lawyers, go to the lawyers in Mexico, and,
Oh, and they
Yeah.
bring people in?
yeah, they bring people in. So
Legally, of
we bring
course.
the people we want to. Yeah, legally, we bring people we want to bring in.
And then you take them back after you're done?
Then we send it back, yeah, we gotta pay to bring them in, we gotta pay to send them back.
And you gotta pay them, take care
Yeah,
of
we
them.
pay a pretty good fee too.
they give them a vehicle.
Give them
But
a
they don't
vehicle.
get that, the people who move them around get the fee, right?
No, they get
They
it.
get the salary?
Those are the ones that have the illegals. Yeah.
He has to provide a restroom within how many feet of
Well,
the,
now you gotta have more than 10 people. So,
okay.
I mean, trees outside don't count?
I limited to 10 people.
Trees don't count? Trees
Oh,
don't
yeah.
count?
When I worked in Montgomery County and in Wolfe County, and several people told me they used to come, their families would come down to Midway area in the harvest, and they would camp out on Boars Mill Road between the creek there and highway there, and they would come down, and then as older uncles would quit doing it, the cousins would add on to it, and so it was a continuing family
Well,
operation.
these,
that
yeah,
would
come
do
from
that.
the hills and whatever you call it, and from all over, but that
Used to get some, you used to get some really fun people from eastern
Yeah.
Kentucky. Golly, I mean, there was one guy we used to call Popeye, because he only had one eye. He'd come down, he was talking about this guy he killed and that guy. He was sitting there hanging the back in the bars with these guys going, oh boy, I don't want to be around these people, because we put them in the shop, we had a shower up there, and they just bring sleeping bags, sleep there, and shower, and go to Midway and eat and drink beer, and come back and do it all over again the next day.
yeah. But I still, I don't think tobacco's gonna be around that much longer.
No, I don't think-
Probably no one here smokes probably.
What about hemp?
Half is gonna take its place.
And you started
Gonna do it?
No, right now I'm afraid, because all I hear is horror stories.
That's gonna be pretty labor intensive, you need tobacco
Labor
blocks for that.
intensive, but they're saying right now, you're just not making anything.
No.
Or you can't get paid, and, I just don't wanna touch it.
That's what I've heard, unless you're
Until they-
processing.
until they prove it.
If you had an oil processing facility, you might.
and you had $1 million machine to oil process.
You know, that's-
How did the allotments work? I remember people would say about our farm that we were lucky somehow because we had a bigger allotment
Well,
than
it's
some
your
other
history.
farms. We
The-
had
Your farm
50
grew
acres.
a lot back
It was
then.
based on acres.
Consistently grew a lot, so you would get an allotment according to what you grew, and everybody had that. And Wolf County's,
We used
Pretty
to
good
go
So when they changed the poundage, they
58.
based it on the number of acres you had,
Right.
and it actually used to get, what, 2,500 pounds per acre?
something.
So they
It's
kind
tillable
of,
acres
that's what,
too.
yeah, but that's how they kind of divided up, that's how they came up with the poundage theory, was that, and then of course your hybrids are actually increasing the yields over that, so when they did go the pound thing, you could cut back on acres and still have more pounds.
Right.
Yeah,
But when the buyer came,
yeah.
everybody got out.
Well, that was,
Well, most of
that's
it-
when I got out.
Yeah, most people got
I
out.
didn't smoke stuff, didn't use it, I'd been on the bottom rail and hung it for,
Right.
so been around enough of that stuff.
Agriculture is really at a
You never did
tough
it?
point right now. You've got tobacco that's going out.
Yeah.
You got the horse business, which got so many obstacles. You're going,
I call us the dinosaurs, I think we're gonna be
We
extinct.
used to call
You
tobacco.
can't write
black
dinosaurs.
rice.
No, we're gonna go extinct.
When I was a kid, they would fly planes over and spray DDT all
Oh,
over.
gosh, yeah.
What,
I don't think that's for DDT.
That was weed killer.
so what did they do now?
You got a hide away or something like that.
They don't use planes anymore.
Oh, no, that's.
They might have been
That one,
trying to eradicate.
Actually, that was crop dusting for
Mr.
aphids.
Gallagher.
They'd spray for aphids and all that. You'd
Yeah.
have some people running it, actually would use planes.
Was that wasn't, she's probably not getting that confused with the eradication of hemp, was it?
No.
They
No.
were spraying
Did
it.
you ever have any of that while growing up on the property you have? I remember when I was younger.
No, I remember on the Gonic place, when I had rented that place, I found a huge patch of it.
I know on Farm,
I got the place now.
I know Fawn Leap, when we were kids growing up, Fawn Leap was right there, and on the other side of the fence, my uncle I said, so you see, there was actually, that was when it used to all be hemp farms, and they grow it for rope.
Right.
And it wasn't marijuana hemp, but it was hemp.
No,
They go,
right.
that's what all you kids call Mary Jane now. It wasn't. It was an entirely different beast. I don't think anybody would have ever smoked that
It
stuff.
grew in the sinkholes some
Yeah, it
because
did
not
grow.
it gets destroyed.
Because I saw some, and they had the sheriff's family came around and eradicated all that in the fence row over there on Fawn
Right.
Leap. When
You just gotta
Mr.
tell 'em.
Coger had, when Mr.
Yeah.
Coger had it.
You tell them, they'll come
Who
back
was
here.
the sheriff that lived out at the crossroads?
Sand.
Sam's.
Oh, yeah.
Man, there was a nice big bushy plant right there at his mailbox. You remember that?
No, I wasn't.
I was in a garden club, and I was looking around the farm for to make my arrangements for the competition. And I found all these pretty weeds, you know, on the farm. And when they got ready to judge them, one of the judges said, "What are you doing with marijuana?" And I said, well, they used to grow marijuana on the farm, I think. And I thought,
It was him.
They probably did.
Oh, you were too busy smoking tobacco to get into that stuff. Nobody would smoke that stuff to begin with.
Yeah.
But when we were little, the school calendar was governed by the tobacco crop. And it used to be so irritating because the boys would all get out of school to go set the tobacco, and the girls didn't get out. But they would, the
That's very
starving,
smart of them.
I guess the housing would determine where we went into school.
We
when school
didn't really
would
start setting until school was out.
Well, you know, tobacco used to be a year-round process because in the fall, you'd burn your beds. We used to have the seed beds back then. You didn't buy water plants and all this. You'd actually,
If you wanted to grow
you'd take,
clover.
we'd have a old steam engine, or else
Yeah.
you'd get cinders or something and drag on a drag, and or else you have the pans and steam your ground where it kill all the weeds. Then you come in, then you cover it with plastic in the fall. Then we got to where you had to kill the things. You just push the button
Right.
and fumigate under the plastic. And then you come back in the spring, you plant your seeds very early in the spring. And then you get out, and then you go through and hand pull the plants, select them on basis. Well, you go through and weed the plant beds first. That was always fun.
Yeah.
You'd have these burlap sacks full of straw, and you put them down, you get on them on your knees, and you go out there on your hands and knees and pull all these little weeds. You had to learn what was weed and what was tobacco, and you pull those. And then when the seeds got bigger in the plants, you would pull them by size, wrap them again, burlap sacks, give them Ricky a sack. But you'd fold them over, and we'd have pieces of wire, you'd hook them, and you'd take them to setters, and then they'd go around the fields with them, and,
You know, when they came out with the greenhouses and
yeah.
you did away with raising, everybody hated raising the plants, pulling plants.
Oh, it just made it a year-round thing, because you start in the fall, then in the wintertime, you're stripping it
Right.
and taking it up and getting paid, you're finally getting your check, and by the time you're through with that, it's time to plant stuff again, off you go.
But on our farm, we had tenants who did all the tobacco things.
No, you had hired hands.
Yeah.
No,
You can
no,
afford-
they lived on the farm, they each had a house.
Kind of like sharecroppers.
They
I
took
guess.
a percentage of the crop profit. We provided the land and
This is tenant farmers.
Yeah.
they were tenant farmers, they lived on the farm, and we had certain families that lived there my whole childhood.
But they also helped with the cattle and the hay.
No,
They didn't.
no.
They just go to the.
No, that was their business. The tobacco was their business, and they shared it with us. There were two families on our farm that did the tobacco, the McLeans and the Urys. The Urys didn't live on our farm. The McLeans had two families on our farm, right?
Tommy Erie worked for us forever. He was our farm manager forever. That was his brother, I think it was.
Right.
Or uncle
Well,
or
Jock
something.
was his
Which one was the
father.
ex? Which year?
That's, yeah, he's probably talking Tom's dad.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Tom, that was.
I'm talking about young Tom.
Yeah.
You're not talking about young Tommy.
No, that was.
Old Tommy.
He's long gone. He was an old man when I was a kid.
Yeah.
He was 60.
Yeah, he was Tommy Erie and he.
But I guess what I was getting back at, you take between the tobacco and the cattle especially, you could afford to hire one, two, some full-time people to help with all of it. Now, when you're just strictly tobacco, you don't need them
As much now.
as much.
No.
So you have a hard time finding a full-time person. Like I have cattle and no tobacco, I can use them in the summer, but I don't need them in the winter, so I have a hard time.
But we only had one full-time person for the cattle,
And then your dad?
and then my dad, yeah. And then the migrant workers who came in the spring and the fall for the tobacco.
Were they migrants or were they coming out of
They
eastern
were-
Kentucky?
Well,
Just-
they were migrating from eastern Kentucky.
But then now
They were
with the
temporary.
HUA, I get like 2 in May for setting and chopping out and all that stuff. And then I get the rest, like 8 of them in August for go take care of housing, stripping, and then mid-December I send everybody back home.
I think we had more than that. I remember a whole lot of men, like maybe 10 or 15.
Well, all the boys would be hired for the
Yeah.
housing.
Mhm.
All the boys.
Yeah, but I'm talking about now, of course you're talking about then.
Yeah.
It was a whole different.
What, is it more mechanized now? Is that-
A little bit more, but not much.
You're just growing
Of course, we
less,
had
that's why you need less?
Well, like,
crews and of
The
course.
stripping, you did everything is by hand.
Yeah, you set the plants by hand, and then you go back, you get a hoe, chop out between the plants, and get rid of the weeds. Do that by hand, then you come back in later in the year when it got a little taller, you'd sucker the stuff, which means you top it and sucker it, you break the blooms off so the leaves would fill out, break
By
off the
hand.
suckers so all the growth would go to the leaves, and then you come in there a little bit after about 30 days, 2 weeks after that, or 3 weeks, I forgot, you spray, well, now you spray it
Now
to
you
make
spray
it
it
ripen.
ripen, yeah.
You didn't used to spray it back then to make it ripen.
Spray
And then you
what?
cut it, you go down double row, well, you
MH30.
Oh.
you spray with MH30, get rid of the suckers now. And you do that, it ripens, but, then you go in, you take 2 rows, you drop a row of sticks between 2 rows, and you go down and you cut 3 sticks up and 3 sticks back, you have a spear, you do it like that. And you go on down and I don't know, I never could cut about 60 or 70 sticks an hour. I
That's
didn't
good,
like
pretty
that.
good. That's not
Well,
bad.
the good guys could cut 100,
Yeah, they can.
125 sticks an hour, they could fly.
Most of them are dead.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be halfway across the road, these guys would finish coming back.
But people talk about, who cut it, they talk about how sick they would get, you
Well,
know,
the
their
nicotine.
skin, and their skin would absorb it.
Well,
Did you
the
get that?
nicotine.
No, never.
But
I didn't either.
but you would hear people talk about,
Right.
Well, we had a guy that worked.
What?
Yeah.
Green tobacco.
Green, yeah.
yeah,
You remember
It
that?
affected the
It's really stuck on
non-smoking.
that.
We had a Hispanic guy work for us, but he couldn't go in a barn with the tobacco, and he'd come out, he'd blow up
Yeah.
like, he couldn't breathe, he'd come out there, couldn't breathe, he's coughing, sputtering, and
Go back
swelling
home.
up all over, and so and that's when we used to hang the tobacco over the horses.
Oh, my God.
When we get in there and,
Does your son work with you on the farm?
He helps with the hay.
Will he carry on, you think?
I don't know. He's got a pretty good job. There's a little more security working for the state than it is.
it's hard to bring somebody, it's hard to convince somebody to grow up on a farm now, because it's,
Well, I just think it's interesting, these farms have been in families for generations and,
you might be
carried
looking at
on,
some of the
carried
last
on, but-
generations over
But
here.
it sounds like it
because
gets harder and
Right,
harder.
yeah.
yeah.
The farms are getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
But I wonder if the diversity didn't actually help. I mean, I think a lot of people did grow wheat,
Yeah.
because, there'd be the combines and they'd be baling, and I guess.
We're
still
still
do.
taking over Wiseburger
To
Mill,
mill.
we take our wheat
Yeah.
over there and sell it to mill. I forgot about that.
And
We
the
do.
corn was a big crop for yourself as well as everybody. And there were sheep in Midway, and there were hens. I mean,
Yeah,
there
the
were
Busters had a
eggs.
lot of sheep over there. The Busters had quite a few sheep back over on that, on Barley Farm.
When I was a child, we had pigs, sheep.
Chickens.
No, we didn't have pigs.
Chicken
We
coop.
did, up on the top of the field, there was a lot, when I was really
Yeah,
young.
but Mother Madden grew the pigs during the war, but then afterwards she.
Right, we got rid of them, but when I was really young, we had pigs, sheep. We had to get rid of the sheep because the dogs from Midway would come out
Yeah,
that's-
exactly.
and hunt them, kill them.
We had 40 sheep killed one night. And after that, Bob said, no more sheep, we're not growing any
We
more
had,
sheep.
we had chickens, but my father didn't like them, so we got rid of them.
And the, you know, truck garden, I mean, everybody had their own garden and orchards.
Well, we had the ice plant, so
Oh, yeah.
we put up so many vegetables and fruits that we filled a whole room at the ice plant and fed James Newell and his family, my grandmother, their 6 kids, our family, and gave it away because it was so plentiful. We gave away.
Everybody used, of course, on our fence rows, all we had were apple trees. So
Well,
you were having
used-
apples all summer long.
Yeah.
We used to plant tomato seeds in tobacco beds, and then we put
Yes.
in the field, on the side of the field, we set out tomato plants with tobacco setters. And we'd tell people, come out and get a bushel of tomatoes, and they'd look at us like we were crazy.
You put
We
lettuce
said,
in
"But
your,
you
we
have
used
to
to put
pick
lettuce
them
in your
yourself."
tobacco bed.
Right,
You
right.
put lettuce on
So
one of your
much
tobacco bed
lettuce.
too.
So
or
they
you
could
got
come
lettuce
and
there.
pick about 8 tomatoes.
Yeah, but I mean,
Makes
you
it
go
seem like
back
it's
to.
fun, doesn't it?
It's a lot of work. We had a
The
lot of help.
grandparents were doing all that.
There seems to be the bourbon industry is really going well now. Does that affect the grain market in this county at all?
I don't, maybe some farmers here and there are lucky enough to sell some corn, so.
Yeah, we have to, what do they do with corn? It has to be a certified
Yeah,
track corn as well.
certain-
Yeah, there's
They're
no
really
certain
particular.
types of grow.
Are there other farmers in here, in this room?
I don't know, raise your
You're a
hand if
farmer,
you're a
right?
farmer. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, say something.
What are your crops, Jimmy?
The way I understand it, the cattle market, the stockyards that they had here in Midway, that they bought more than cattle. Because I've heard my aunt, well, she died 2 years ago, and she was 97, I've heard her tell about driving the turkeys from out the farm all the way to the Midway.
They were driving down Leestown Road and through downtown Lexington to stockyards in Winchester and things like that.
She said the main thing is to start early enough so you could get the turkeys to Midway before they started to roost.
But then they go up the trees, wouldn't it?
I do have one sign. Do you remember when we used to, they would gather the cattle on the north side of the farm in the lane, and they would stop traffic on Leestown.
Yeah.
And that stopping traffic was a matter of me wandering out and just telling somebody to stop. And they had signs that said cattle crossing, you remember that?
Yeah.
And they'd cross them, and they go for the summer, they maybe move them to the southern part of the farm. So now, I think today, to stop traffic on Leestown might be,
Good luck.
I've turned them loose on Leestown before.
Have you?
And
We're looking at steak or hamburger.
it gets a little exciting because they don't stop.
No.
People still drive 40, 50 miles an hour.
We used to
60.
run ours down at Spring Station, Dad didn't get on horses like we had old Peggy and had a couple old, Tennessee Walker and old quarter horse stuff. They kind of heard them down Spring Station Road, we moved them from field to field, we were raising steers back when we did that.
One night, late at night, a man knocked at our door. And he was driving down Leestown Road and there was a hole in the fence and a cow got out and he hit the cow. And he didn't kill the cow, he broke the cow's back leg. So Uncle Noel came out and he put the cow in a sling hanging from the ceiling of the barn stall. And he set the leg in some sort of cast or something. And that poor cow hung around for about 6
Literally.
weeks.
Literally hung around.
Hung around in a sling. Uncle Noah was just experimenting to see if it would work, and it worked.
He was a veterinarian.
He was a veterinarian.
That's a good clarification.
Jimmy, you're still doing cattle then? On how many farms are you working?
What do what?
I
You're
remember
still
when
raising
Newell
cattle?
operated.
Is that the main thing you do?
That's right.
Out in Scott County and
In Scott County mostly.
and how many generations?
3 or 4.
Did you all raise tobacco before?
Mm-hmm.
Did you raise anything else?
Any what?
Any other animals besides cattle,
Hogs?
hogs?
It's funny, there was a article in the Clipper, and it was about downtown, the city council was making a law that everybody had to have these fences in front of their yard because the chickens were getting out in front of the cows. And the cars that were coming through would get hit. So if so many people had chickens in their,
The lots were much bigger though, you know, if you look at the oldest houses, all the land behind those houses
okay.
was land for them to have their pigs and chickens. So, like, the lots were much bigger,
Or deeper anyway.
deeper.
Like our house, it went all the way to Cross Street, went from Bruin to Cross Street. And John McDaniel said you could look over the fence and they had chickens in there, they'd have a horse in there, and they had a milk cow in there. And
Do we have any ordinances in town? We don't have it.
Now we do.
Now we do.
You have to have the chickens enclosed.
I mean, in a cage or?
Well, they can't
They
go
can't go
around.
around.
Maybe free range. Yeah.
Enclosed.
Have them clothes while they wear a little top.
Yeah,
Dress them up.
dress them up.
Well, with Miss Lehman that lived in the house that's empty on Turner Street
Oh, yeah.
grew prize chickens, and she would take them to the state fair, and she won all kinds of purple.
They was the ones that
They
started
tore
the
down
antique
the
store.
chicken houses
That was in the
years
back.
ago.
And that was in the back against, was it Cross, not, what's in the alley that goes through there?
Cross.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that's not Cross Street there, that's,
yeah.
you talking about, no, I thought you talking about where the original Miss Lehman lived, where she and her sister lived right there on, is it?
I don't think about the house that's been empty for years.
Oh, on the corner there.
Betty Logan's.
Yeah, oh,
They were
Betty.
It
Lehman's
still has a
too.
fence around it.
Betty Logan had her wedding reception in that house. Betty Logan Lehman,
Yeah,
Fagan.
because I know on Miss Lehman, they had the house right there, just down halfway between the corner and the Midway Presbyterian Church.
In the middle of Bruin.
Yeah, that's right, Bruin Street, right there on the right. And that was because she was the one that started the Lehman's Antique Store up there.
Mhm.
And she and her sister. Was it Frances?
Elizabeth, there was.
Jeanette.
Jeanette and Elizabeth Lehman.
It
That's
was
it.
with Jeanette, Elizabeth was the oldest, and then Jeanette, and then Joe.
And they go
And
on.
Bill was,
Well, wasn't that originally a funeral home?
Yeah. decent.
Lehman's store was.
No, the one across
The
from
one
the
on-
post office.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was a funeral home?
Yeah.
I think
They
Betty
believed it
Logan
was an
saw over
undertaker.
Bill, and I think he was next to the oldest. I think Elizabeth was the oldest, and then Bill, I think. And then Jeanette.
Gotten off agriculture.
Well, that's okay. We could talk all night, but it is 8 o'clock and the library's getting ready to close. So, you know.
And you need to go home and check those door knobs out.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Hank Pinkerton. I'm no relationship to any Pinkertons around here, but I wanted to let you know, I talked to Joe Gravis tonight, and he is on the agricultural committee for the event. So he'd be very interested in knowing what your thoughts or concerns were, and you can get in touch with him. I've got his phone number, but you can get in touch with him through the government hotline, everything else like that. So, but I've enjoyed being here. I just moved here, so I come from Eastern Kentucky, where my name wasn't very well liked because of Pinkerton Manning. And I moved here, and I find out I was in the middle of my namesake was in the middle of a controversy about melodeon, so may cause a big expense, so just call me the other Pinkerton.
Well, thank you all so much for coming, and for those of you that I put on the spot and asked you to talk a little bit, we appreciate all your knowledge and hearing all the history behind what you've done for so long. Thank you.
Remember this stuff.